She was just a quiet passenger in seat 14A until the F-22 Raptors demanded her call sign. The Airbus A321 of Transair Flight 920 cruised at 37,000 feet over the Sierra Valley desert. Families slept. Businessmen typed at laptops. And a teenager leaned across the aisle with his phone aimed at the horizon. That's when a shadow swept across the fuselage. An F-22 Raptor locked into formation outside the starboard windows, razor-edged. Gray. Unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the cabin as passengers pressed their faces to the glass, phones rising to capture what they thought was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. We'd love to see how far our stories travel, and don't forget to hit subscribe to Stories Unseen so you never miss the next powerful story. In seat 14A, Adriana Cole barely looked up from her crossword. 48 years old. Neat blazer, hair tied in a practical bun streaked with gray. To everyone else, she was just another professional heading east for work. To her, invisibility was armor. What no one could see was the thin burn scar at her temple from a cockpit fire long ago, or the titanium implant buried in her shoulder, a relic from the classified Omega trials, or the flick of her eyes as she measured the Raptor's wing angle and flawless station keeping. Instincts that hadn't dulled since her years in the Air Force. Her call sign back then had been simple: haunting ghost. The captain's voice broke through the cabin speakers. Smooth but strained, ladies and gentlemen. You may have noticed a military escort. Nothing unusual, just a training exercise. Please remain seated. The lie was elegant, but Adriana knew better. Escorts didn't close in this tight, and they didn't fly in pairs without purpose. Sure enough, a second Raptor slid into view on the port side. Canopy flashing in the sun. Perfect symmetry. Perfect discipline. Too perfect. Across the aisle, a businessman muttered into his phone. 2 jets. Looks like Top Gun up here. Adriana resisted the urge to correct him. The F-22 wasn't Hollywood. It was the most lethal air dominance fighter in existence. She had been there when the prototypes first lifted off at Ironwood Test Facility. And later, when Sierra Valley made her indispensable to the Raptor's integration. Now, she was reduced to penciling letters in a crossword while the machines she once shepherded flanked her civilian flight. A flight attendant paused, eyes wide, forcing a smile. Pretty exciting, isn't it? Adriana's reply was clipped. They're good pilots. The attendant waited for more, then moved on. Adriana's pen hovered, the puzzle forgotten. This wasn't an escort. It was an intercept. Minutes stretched. The Raptors never broke away. If anything, they inched closer, like predators circling, waiting for a signal. Then the intercom crackled again. This time the captain's tone was formal, cautious. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received an unusual request from the aircraft beside us. They would like to speak with a passenger in seat 14A. Every head turned, phones lowered. Adriana Cole's pen froze in midair. The quiet woman in 14A understood. Her past had just been called back to altitude 37,000 feet above the desert sky. Ghost was airborne again. They thought the Raptors were just a show until seat 14A became the mission for most of the cabin. The 2 F-22s were an odd spectacle, something to film, to post, to laugh about. Phones buzzed, lenses pressed to windows, whispers about Top Gun drifting up and down the aisle. For Adriana Cole, the sight was a knife-twisting old scar tissue. 15 years earlier, she'd watched a Raptor lift from the Ironwood Test Facility, still classified then, carving the Nevada sky like it owned it. Back then, she was one of 6 cleared to touch its flight test data. Back then, she was proud, before the fire, before the medal in her shoulder, before the Air Force retired her body and her name. Now 2 Raptors bracketed Transair Flight 920's Airbus A321 at 37,000 feet, and they weren't leaving. She closed her crossword, eyes snagging on a Clue high-altitude reconnaissance aircraft. The correct answer should have been SR-71. The boxes didn't fit. The word she penciled instead was simple, heavier than the paper could hold intel in testing. Every sortie bled intelligence into binders stamped classified. Today, she wasn't collecting intel. She was the intel across the aisle. A businessman in 14D spoke too loud into his phone. Yeah, 2 Raptors. Don't know why. Must be a training stunt. Crazy. Right, Adriana bit back correction. The F-22 wasn't a stunt. It was a 5th-gen Predator stealth with thrust vectoring, able to pivot in the sky like physics had blinked. And those pilots. They weren't sightseeing. She glanced at the canopies. Even from here, she caught the faint tilt of a helmet. The lead jet wasn't watching the airliner. It was watching her. The captain's voice crackled overhead, smooth but tight. Ladies and gentlemen, the Air Force has joined us briefly today. Routine exercise. Please enjoy the rest of your flight. Escorts didn't sit this close. And when the formation subtly shifted, one Raptor sliding forward, the other aft, having the attack angles her stomach answered for her. This was no exercise. The cabin's mood tilted. The novelty drained out, leaving a skin of unease. The teenager in 11E lowered his camera and simply stared. A new understanding flickering across his face. The adults might not be in control. Flight attendant Jennifer leaned toward 14A, eyes flicking to the fighters. Strange they're still here, she murmured. Usually they peel off after a few minutes. They have their reasons, Adriana said. Flat. Certain. That calm shook Jennifer more than panic could have. Most people were giddy or frightened. This woman wasn't surprised at all. Minutes crawled. The Raptors held steady, patient as predators circling. The Wi-Fi stuttered with passengers refreshing news, trading rumors no one could confirm. Then the intercom opened again. The captain's tone had shifted formal. Careful, like he was balancing on a wire. Ladies and gentlemen, we've received a request from the military aircraft accompanying us. They'd like to speak directly with a passenger on board, seat 14A. The air cracked, heads swiveled, phones dropped. Even the baby in row 8 hiccuped into silence. Jennifer froze in the aisle, gaze snapping from the window back to Adriana. The woman who had been invisible for 12 years now had the entire plane staring at her. Adriana's finger hovered over the call button. 3 seconds, long enough to weigh the cost, if she pressed it. The life she'd built, the quiet cafe in Tucson, the false anonymity would evaporate in front of 200 witnesses. Outside, 2 Raptors waited for her answer. She exhaled once, steady, and pressed the button. The cabin gasped, and the mission she thought she'd escaped 15 years ago came hunting her again at 37,000 feet. They thought she was just a passenger until the Raptors called her by an old call-sign Ghost. This wasn't protocol. Fighter escorts didn't request conversations with civilians. Someone had run her name, pulled a ghost file out of Air Force archives. When Adriana pressed the button, the cabin reacted like she'd fired a flare. Heads turned, whispers cut the air. She doesn't look military. Why her flight attendant Jennifer moved fast, almost like she'd been waiting. Ma'am, Captain Reynolds would like you in the cockpit. Now! Adriana slid her crossword away and stood the aisle, now a gauntlet. Every step cracking the cover she'd built for 15 years. Inside the cockpit, the reinforced door was already open. Captain Reynolds, 58. Steady hands but unsettled eyes gestured her in. First Officer Martinez tracked the instruments, though her gaze darted back with sharp curiosity. I've flown 32 years, Reynolds said quietly. Never had a request like this. The flight leader insists on speaking to you directly, says the clearance is secure. Through the windscreen, the Raptors held formation, precise and deliberate, closing in like a verdict. She caught Langley tail codes and felt her chest tighten. That unit had been hers once back in the early Raptor trials. Did they give a name? Adriana asked. Martinez adjusted her headset. Lead's call sign is Viper, requesting contact on 243.0, emergency military channel. The name hit her like a jolt. Major David Chun. Ambitious, reckless, brilliant the last time she saw him. He was still a captain hungry for sky. If he was leading this intercept, it wasn't by chance. "I'll take the call," Adriana said. Reynolds passed her a spare headset. She keyed the mic. The channel hissed alive. "Transair 920. This is Viper 1, requesting passenger in seat 14A for authentication. Sierra 7 Charlie Niner 0. How copy?" Her pulse spiked. She answered steady. "Viper 1, this is Cole. Copy you 5x5. Static." Then a voice she hadn't heard in 15 years. Older, but still sharp. "Ghost." The cockpit froze. Reynolds and Martinez stared. "Need verification," Chun said. "Call sign and last duty station." Adriana drew a slow breath. "Call sign Ghost. Last assignment Sierra Valley Test Center. Project officer. Raptor Avionics Integration." Reynolds blinked. Martinez's hand slipped off the throttle. Awe replaced disbelief. Then Chun's voice returned. "Urgent Ghost. We've got a code black on the F-22 systems. We need your consultation. Can you divert with us to Nellis?" The words hit harder than turbulence. Code black, catastrophic compromise of a 5th-gen system, if true. It wasn't just one aircraft at risk. It was doctrine, deterrence, the whole edge of American air power. "I'm a civilian now. No clearance, negative." Chun cut in. "Your clearance was reactivated 6 hours ago. Emergency authority." "You're the only one who can help," Martinez whispered. "Captain, ATC just rerouted us. Destination Harry Reid International, Las Vegas. Raptors will escort all the way. Outside." The fighters tightened again, guarding like predators circling their prize. Chun's voice pressed through the static. "Ghost. Time is critical. Do you accept?" Adriana thought of her cafe in Tucson, the quiet life she'd built from ashes. It dissolved in a single breath. She pressed transmit. "Viper 1. I accept. What's my ride to Nellis? We'll have a helo waiting. And Ghost, welcome back." The A321 banked toward Nevada. For the first time in 15 years, Adriana Cole wasn't hiding. She was being pulled back into the fight. They thought it was just a diversion until the escort tightened into a combat box. The Airbus A321 banked hard, desert horizon tilting across the cockpit windows. Harry Reid International lit up on the nav display. Captain Reynolds' grip whitened on the yoke. Transair 920, cleared for immediate descent. Priority handling. Military escort remains until further advised. Adriana Ghost again. Whether she wanted it or not, watched the Raptors shift. Their box pattern wasn't just protective. It was tactical. A formation meant for threats. Trouble was already airborne. In the cabin, unease cracked into panic. Phones lifted despite pleas. Children cried. A mother whispered prayers. The businessman from 12D muttered into his recorder. "Fighter escorted diversion, this is history." The teenager in 11 stared at Adriana. Phone trembling. "Ma'am, are you CIA? She didn't break stride. Finish your homework." Whispers erupted. Her cover was ash. Back at the controls, First Officer Martinez asked quietly. "What's code black?" Adriana met her gaze. "Catastrophic systems compromise. If the Raptors are infected, it can cascade fleet-wide. That means U.S. air defense could crack open in hours." Reynolds swallowed hard. "And you're the one who can stop it." Her silence was answer enough. Vegas glimmered ahead, neon bleeding into desert dusk. Harry Reid Tower cleared a runway, sweeping aside traffic. The descent was surreal. Liners didn't land like this. Raptors shifting. Martinez called, "Outside." The escort slid ahead, engines hot. Then a third Raptor clawed upward from Nellis. The box sealed tight. "This isn't escort," Adriana muttered. "They're bracing for an intercept another aircraft," Reynolds asked. "Intercept what?" No answer. Just silence, heavier than any turbulence. The A321 slammed asphalt, reversers roaring. Emergency vehicles lined the runway. Crash trucks, Humvees, black SUVs. At the far end, an MH-60 helicopter already spun hot, blades slicing desert air. "Your ride." Martinez whispered. Then Viper's voice cut the radio. Clipped and urgent. Ghost. Secondary threat inbound. Unknown aircraft. Not civilian, not friendly. Situation escalating faster than predicted. Brief en route to Nellis. Adriana unclipped her belt. The cafe was gone. The war had her again. The jet rolled to a stop. FBI jackets and Air Force police swarmed the isolated apron. Passengers gasped, plastered to windows. Jennifer's voice cracked. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated." But Adriana was already moving. Eyes locked on the helicopter. If Viper was right, the fight wasn't waiting at Nellis. It was already in the sky. 3 seconds. That's how long Adriana Cole Ghost needed before her brain locked back into combat logic. The secure room buzzed with encrypted feeds. But one fact chilled her. Someone out there knew exactly how to push the F-22's most vulnerable systems to the brink, and they weren't guessing. They knew. Captain Reynolds handed her headset back. His voice was steady, but the question was sharp. "Ma'am, what exactly did you do in the Air Force?" She chose the middle ground. Test pilot, avionics integration. The Raptors in the sky, I helped build their brain. Word spread down the aisle like fire. The businessman in 12D almost saluted. The boy in 11E asked, "Did you fly them?" She only said, "Among other things." The understatement of a lifetime. Her mind was already building simulation trees. Code Black could mean one of 3 things: catastrophic software flaw, hidden design vulnerability, or worse, a hostile exploit. None were survivable. The helicopter waiting on the tarmac wasn't airline transport. It was a blacked-out MH-60. 2 airmen snapped salutes. Staff Sergeant Torres spoke over the rotor wash. "Colonel Patterson sends his compliments. Immediate transport to Nellis. Flight suit waiting on board." Her hand returned the salute before she realized it. Reflex came easier than breath. Below on the flight, test ranges flashed by places she once knew better than her own hometown. Hangars open, crews running. Not a drill. Colonel Patterson was waiting on the asphalt. Silver hair, eagles on his collar. An old colleague, carrying new weight. Ghost. Civilian life suits you. Shame we had to pull you back like this. How bad? Bad enough the Pentagon reactivated your clearance in 6 hours. Underground. Patterson introduced the team. Lt. Colonel Sarah Kim. Avionics integration. Dr. Marcus Webb. Defense intelligence. Captain Lisa Morgan. 27th Fighter Squadron test pilot. They wasted no time. Patterson brought up the display. 3 days ago. Raptors reported intermittent sensor fusion failures. We suspected software. Code came back clean, Kim added. It only happens above 35,000 feet, always during electronic surveillance. Morgan leaned forward. The logs show phantom signals. At first we thought ghost data, then realized it wasn't random. Someone's targeting our fusion channels. Adriana stepped in close. "Show me the waveforms." The traces lit the screen. Her pulse spiked. This wasn't interference. It was surgical. This isn't noise. Someone's probing your Raptors. Not to crash them, to map them. The silence was heavy. Patterson finally asked, "How many birds? 17? Squadrons from Florida to Maine. Same pattern." She drew the blade. "Then it's systemic. Somebody knows the F-22 architecture. Better than they should. That means either stolen specs or a leak inside." Morgan's voice was quiet. "It gets worse. Same probes on F-35s, even satellite constellations." Adriana didn't hesitate. "Then it's not just electronic warfare. It's preparation. Someone's mapping America's military backbone layer by layer." Dr. Webb said it flat. "We need you to help design countermeasures. Tomorrow's test flight will trigger the interference deliberately, not with one aircraft." Adriana snapped. "That's handing them live combat data. You need layers, multiple altitudes, ground stations, spectrum defense, real-time analysis. Otherwise you're blind." She grabbed a marker, sketching across the board formations, counter arrays, layered data nets. When she finished, the implication was brutal if the breach wasn't foreign. It was internal. Espionage. Patterson paced, jaw tight. "If you're right, this isn't just a code black. It's a breach of the defense establishment itself. Morgan added another blow. The squadrons hit hardest. They're the ones training with NATO partners. Adriana's voice dropped. Then start with the list of every foreign national who's touched an F-22 in the last 18 months. Patterson nodded grimly. We'll pull it. But Ghost, understand this. If the leak runs as deep as you think, tomorrow's test flight won't just expose the enemy. It'll expose you. The war room fell silent. Because if Ghost was right, this wasn't just about Raptors. It was about every advanced weapon system America had, and someone, somewhere, had dragged her back into the fight for a reason she hadn't uncovered yet.